Ethan Carter's hands were the kind that told the whole story, cracked at the knuckles, stained with concrete dust, wrapped around the fingers of a 6-year-old girl who still believed the world was mostly good. They were walking out of the corner store on a Tuesday evening when Lily went still. Not scared still. Wonder still. Across the sidewalk, a woman stood beneath the amber spill of a street lamp, unhurried, effortlessly put together, the kind of quiet that made everything around her feel louder. Lily stared the way children stare at things they don't have words for yet. Then she leaned up toward her father and whispered. Barely a breath, but the street carried it perfectly. "Dad, I want you to marry her," the woman heard. Ethan felt the ground shift beneath his work boots. Neither of them knew it yet, but something had already begun. Ethan Carter had learned, over the years, to take up as little space as possible. Not physically, he was a broad man, built from years of hauling material up scaffolding and pouring concrete in the August heat. But in every other way, he had quietly made himself smaller. He stopped taking the booth at the diner and sat at the counter instead. He stopped answering when coworkers asked what he did on weekends. He learned to carry the weight without letting anyone see how much it cost him. He had been doing it again tonight, moving through the corner store on Larkin Street with his head down, Lily's hand in his, a half-gallon of milk tucked under one arm. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The linoleum floors were sticky near the produce section. He knew this store the way he knew the inside of his own apartment. Every aisle, every shortcut, every item he could not quite afford, but sometimes bought anyway, because Lily had looked at it a certain way. Lily was 6 years old and entirely unaware of how much she asked of the universe by simply existing. She had her mother's eyes, wide and dark, and full of something that hadn't been worn down yet. She asked questions the way other children asked for candy, constantly, without guilt, never satisfied with a half answer. And lately, the questions had shifted into territory that made Ethan's chest tighten in ways he didn't know how to explain. What did Mommy smell like? Did she laugh loud or quiet? Do you think she can still see me from heaven, or does she have to look down really hard? He always answered. He made himself answer, even when the words came out thin and careful, like he was rationing them. Because the alternative, watching Lily learn to stop asking, was something he refused to let happen. They were 2 steps out the door when she stopped. It wasn't the stop of a child who'd spotted a candy display or a stray dog. It was different. Her grip on his hand went slack, not because she'd let go, but because her entire body had shifted its attention somewhere else entirely. Across the sidewalk, maybe 15 feet away, a woman stood beside the bus shelter with her phone in one hand and a paper coffee cup in the other. She wasn't doing anything remarkable. She was simply standing there, coat the color of charcoal, hair pulled back, posture easy and unbothered. But there was something in the quality of her stillness that made her impossible to look away from, the way a lit window looks different from all the dark ones around it. Ethan noticed her the way he noticed most things these days, briefly, and then not. Lily did not look away. What happened next, Ethan would replay for a long time afterward, not because it was dramatic, because it wasn't. That was the thing that stayed with him, how small and unhurried the moment was, and how thoroughly it rearranged everything. The woman had crouched down without warning. Lily's little drawstring bag had slipped from her shoulder and spilled its contents across the sidewalk. 2 crayons, a folded drawing, a plastic dinosaur she called Gerald. And before Ethan had even processed what was happening, the woman in the charcoal coat was already kneeling, gathering the crayons with careful fingers, handing the dinosaur back to Lily with both hands, like it mattered. She smiled at Lily. Not the cautious, polite smile adults give children they don't know. A real one, the kind that reached the corners of her eyes. And Lily, who was shy with strangers in the way that most 6-year-olds are shy, only looked up at the woman for a long moment, drinking in something Ethan couldn't name. Then she leaned back toward her father and said it, just like that. Barely above a breath, but the quiet of the Tuesday evening street carried it across the distance without mercy. "Dad, I want you to marry her." The woman's expression didn't collapse into embarrassment. It shifted, surprise, unmistakably, but something underneath that Ethan couldn't read. She straightened slowly. A man walking past laughed. An older woman waiting for the bus pressed her lips together to hide a smile. Ethan felt heat climb the back of his neck and had absolutely no idea what to do with his face. Olivia Hayes had not planned to be in this part of the South Side on a Tuesday evening. She had planned, like every other Tuesday, to go straight from the office to her apartment, pour herself a glass of wine she wouldn't finish, and sit with a project file she had already memorized. But something about the office had felt unbearable today. The meetings that said nothing, the clients who wanted beautiful homes and then furnished them with their own bad taste, the particular hollowness of being very good at something that stopped meaning what it used to. She had gotten off the train 4 stops early just to walk. And she had walked until she needed coffee, and the only place nearby was a corner store on Larkin Street. She was not, by nature, a woman who crouched on sidewalks to collect fallen crayons. But the little girl's face had done something to her. There was a quality to the child's surprise, the way her eyes went wide when a stranger bothered to help, that suggested she hadn't been shown that particular kindness very many times. And Olivia had found herself on the ground before she'd made a decision about it. The child's whisper hit her like a small stone dropped into still water. She felt the ripple move through her and settle somewhere she hadn't been paying attention to in a long time. She looked at the man, the father. He was tall, with the kind of build that came from actual labor rather than a gym. His jacket was faded at the elbows, and he was holding a half-gallon of milk like he had forgotten it was there. He looked mortified in the way of someone who was also, beneath the mortification, a little bit devastated. She turned to the little girl first. "What's your name?" Olivia asked. "Lily." The child answered without hesitation, which was either confidence or the total absence of self-consciousness. With 6-year-olds, it was hard to tell the difference. "That's a good name." Olivia nodded seriously, as if she had considered it carefully. "I'm Olivia." Lily pointed at the dinosaur Olivia had handed back. "That's Gerald." "Gerald looks like he's been through a lot." Lily grinned, sudden and wide and completely unguarded. Ethan made a sound in his throat that wasn't quite a laugh and wasn't quite anything else. Olivia straightened and glanced at him. He opened his mouth, and what came out was, "I'm sorry about..." And then he stopped, because he genuinely didn't know how to finish the sentence. "Don't be," she said. Simple as that. They stood there a moment in the particular way of 2 adults who have been thrown into a small social situation and are deciding simultaneously whether to extend it. Lily was looking between them with the patient attention of a child who had already decided how this should go and was waiting for the adults to catch up. Lily tugged Olivia's sleeve and asked what she did for work, the way Lily asked about everything, directly, without preamble, as if the question had been waiting in line. Olivia reached into her coat pocket and produced a card. She held it out to Lily, not to Ethan. "I design spaces," she said. "Rooms, buildings." Lily took the card with both hands and studied it with the gravity of someone receiving an important document. The card was matte black with clean white lettering, her name, her studio, and a phone number printed in the same small font beneath. Even at a glance, it spoke a language that was very far from Larkin Street. Olivia Hayes. Hayes Interior Design. Ethan looked at it for exactly long enough to understand what it meant. The kind of clients, the kind of buildings, the kind of world. And then he looked somewhere else. They said their goodbyes. Lily waved. Olivia walked back toward the bus shelter, and Ethan stood on the sidewalk holding his daughter's hand, and a half-gallon of milk and a business card he had absolutely no business holding. They walked home. Lily talked about Gerald, and what she thought Olivia's apartment looked like, and whether designers got to pick the colors, or if someone else did. Ethan answered in the right places without hearing most of it. At the corner before their building, he looked down at the card one more time. The street lamps were on by now, casting everything in that particular amber that made even tired streets look like they meant something. He thought about the way Lily had smiled, not the everyday smile she gave him when he made her pancakes or let her stay up past 8. Something older than that. Something that looked, just slightly, like recognition. He kept walking. He did not throw the card away. He told himself he simply hadn't found a trash can. But when they got home and he emptied his jacket pockets onto the kitchen counter, keys, a receipt, a loose bolt from the worksite, he set the card down separately, face up, and left it there. He didn't look at it again that night, but he didn't turn it over either. The card stayed on the kitchen counter for 3 days. Ethan told himself it was because he kept forgetting to move it. On the 4th morning, while Lily was eating cereal and asking whether Gerald could come to school in her pocket, Ethan picked up the card and typed the name into his phone. Hayes Interior Design. The website loaded slowly on his cracked screen, all clean lines and high ceilings, and rooms that looked like they belonged in a magazine nobody he knew actually subscribed to. The project's page listed buildings in Lincoln Park, River North, the Gold Coast. The client's section didn't name names, but it didn't need to. The language of the photography said everything. He put the card in the kitchen drawer, face down this time, beneath a takeout menu and a spare key that didn't fit any lock he currently owned. That evening, Lily asked about Olivia before she asked about dinner. "Do you think she designs kids' rooms too?" Lily set Gerald on the table and looked at him seriously. "Because I was thinking my room could use a window seat." "Your room has a window," Ethan said. "That's not the same thing." He made pasta and changed the subject to Gerald's apparent need for a vehicle, and Lily accepted the detour with the temporary cooperation of a child who had not forgotten but was willing to wait. She brought up Olivia again on Thursday and Friday. Each time Ethan found a different route around the conversation, not because he had anything against Olivia Hayes specifically, but because he had learned, slowly over the years, that it was easier not to want things you couldn't have. The lesson had been hard to learn. He did not intend to unlearn it. Then the foreman called on Monday morning with a job, a building on West Monroe, renovation on the 2nd floor lobby. Ethan wrote down the address on the back of a receipt and shoved it into his jacket pocket. He didn't look it up. He didn't connect it to anything. He simply showed up at 7 in the morning with his tools and his thermos, the way he always did. The name on the building directory stopped him in the elevator. Hayes Interior Design, Suite 214. He stood there long enough for the doors to close on their own. He told himself it meant nothing. 12 floors of offices, dozens of companies. It was coincidence, the ordinary collision of a city going about its business. He went to work. He kept his head down. He focused on the lobby baseboards and the section of water-damaged drywall near the east entrance, and the very specific task of not thinking about the 2nd floor. Olivia found him at noon. She came through the lobby on her way back from a client meeting, stopped when she saw him, and said his name with a kind of careful neutrality that told him she had decided in advance not to make it strange. "I didn't know you worked in this building," she said. "Just this week." Ethan straightened up, aware of the dust on his forearms and the fact that he was holding a putty knife. "Lobby renovation?" Olivia nodded. She was in a different coat today, slate blue, structured at the shoulders. She looked like she fit inside the building in a way that he decidedly did not. He was aware of this the way you're aware of weather, not thinking about it exactly, but feeling it in everything. "How's Lily?" she asked. Good. He took a breath. Yeah. She asks about you. Something shifted in Olivia's expression, not dramatically, just a small, quiet change, like a door opening an inch. Does she? She has opinions about window seats now. Olivia almost smiled. That's my fault. I mentioned them in passing. They stood there in the half-renovated lobby, with the smell of plaster dust between them, and Ethan had the distinct sensation of standing on ice that was thinner than it looked. Before she turned to go, Olivia added her personal number in his phone. Practical, without ceremony, in case Lily ever wanted to ask more questions about window seats. She said it exactly like that. He let her. It was Lily, ultimately, who got him to send the text. 3 nights later, she climbed into his lap while he was watching nothing in particular on television and put both hands on his face, the way she did when she wanted his full attention. "Dad," she said, "can we have dinner with Olivia?" He listed several reasonable objections. She listened to all of them with her head tilted, the way she listened to things she had already decided not to agree with. Then she said, "Please," in the voice she reserved for things that actually mattered to her, and Ethan looked at his daughter's face and found that he had run out of arguments. He sent a short text. "Lily has been asking. Dinner sometime this week if you're free. Nothing fancy." He put the phone face down and went to do the dishes. The reply came before he'd finished. "Thursday works. You pick the place." He picked a diner on Halsted that he knew well enough not to have to think about the prices. Olivia arrived on time, which he'd half expected, and without any indication that the diner was beneath her, which he'd half dreaded. She came in, spotted Lily immediately, and let Lily drag her into the booth by the hand before she'd even taken off her coat. By the time Ethan sat down across from them, they were already deep in a discussion about whether Gerald the dinosaur was a carnivore or an herbivore, and Olivia was arguing Gerald's case for being an omnivore with a seriousness that made Lily dissolve into giggles. Ethan watched them and felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Not happiness exactly. Something more fragile than that. The way a muscle feels when it's been held rigid for years and someone finally tells it it's allowed to let go, and it doesn't know whether to feel relief or pain. He ordered the cheapest thing on the menu out of habit, and then realized he wasn't counting. The thought arrived with such unexpected simplicity that it took him a moment to understand what it meant. He was sitting at a table and not counting. He couldn't remember the last time that had happened. Olivia caught him looking somewhere past the menu and said nothing. She refilled Lily's water glass without being asked. She ate her food without performing appreciation for it, without commenting on the diner, without doing any of the things a person does when they are making an effort to seem comfortable. She was simply comfortable. Or if she wasn't, she carried it so well that the difference stopped mattering. Walking home afterward, Lily between them on the sidewalk, holding one hand each and swinging slightly every few steps, Ethan thought about what it would cost him to want this. The math of it. The distance between Larkin Street and West Monroe, measured not in miles, but in everything else. He thought about it again at the worksite the next morning, when his co-worker Marcus dropped a coffee cup on the sawhorse beside him and said, without particular cruelty, "Heard you had dinner with that designer." Ethan kept working. Lily wanted to. Marcus shrugged the shrug of a man who considered himself a realist. "She's got clients in the Gold Coast, man. Buildings in River North. You think a woman like that is hanging around because she's into the company?" He picked up his coffee. "She feels bad for you. That's what that is. Rich people do that. Adopt a situation for a while until something else comes along." Ethan said nothing. Marcus moved on. The words settled into him the way cold does, not all at once, but gradually through the layers. He tried to set them aside. He managed it for almost a week. Then he was on the second floor landing one afternoon, waiting for the elevator, when he heard Olivia's voice through the open door of the stairwell. She was on the phone, walking up from the lobby. He didn't intend to listen. But the stairwell had that particular acoustic quality of enclosed spaces, and her words arrived clearly before he could move. "I already told you, I have plans Saturday." A brief silence as the other person spoke. Then, "It's not the kind of thing I want to cancel. I'll see you at the Harmon Project next week." She came through the door a moment later and almost walked into him. She recovered quickly, gave him a brief smile, and headed down the corridor toward her suite. Ethan stood at the elevator and did what people do when they are already halfway to a conclusion. He filled in the blanks in the only way that felt consistent with everything else. Some Gold Coast party, some wealthy client or colleague, and she had declined it for plans she wouldn't name. For what? For a diner on Holstead? For a 6-year-old's questions about window seats? Marcus's words came back, and this time they brought geometry with them. The angle of Olivia's life, the angle of his, and the widening space between them that he had been pretending for a few foolish weeks. Wasn't there? The text slowed first. Olivia would send something. A photo of a window seat she'd seen in an architecture book. A question about whether Lily preferred blue or green. And Ethan would draft a reply in his head and then not send it. Not because he had nothing to say. Because he had too much. And none of it was anything he knew how to put into a message without it meaning more than he could afford to mean. He canceled their next dinner plan with a work excuse that was partly true. He took a different route through the lobby in the mornings. He stayed on his phone during the lunch hour when he usually would have been walking. At home, Lily asked why Olivia hadn't come over. "She's busy," Ethan said. Lily looked at him with her mother's eyes, that particular stillness that meant she was deciding whether to accept an answer or take it apart. She accepted it. For now. A week went by, then another. Then one evening, Ethan's phone lit up with a text from Olivia. He almost didn't open it. When he did, it was 6 words. "If I did something wrong, I want to know." He sat with the phone in his hands for a long time, long enough for Lily to fall asleep and for the apartment to go quiet around him. Long enough to compose a dozen responses in his head and discard all of them, because the honest answer required him to say things out loud that he had spent 4 years learning to keep down. He set the phone on the counter, face down. He did not reply. Olivia waited 3 more days. She was not a woman who chased, not because she was proud, but because she had been alive long enough to understand that you cannot want something into being for someone else. If Ethan Carter had built a wall, she did not have the tools to take it apart. She could only decide whether to stand outside it indefinitely or to walk away with what remained of her own equilibrium. She chose to walk away. She did not delete his number. She did not tell herself she was fine. She sat in her well-designed apartment on a Friday night and felt the particular loneliness of someone who had, briefly, unexpectedly, felt less alone. And then watched the distance open back up again. She thought about Lily's hand in hers on the sidewalk, swinging between the two of them, and she set the thought aside with the care of someone handling something breakable. On Larkin Street, Ethan put Lily to bed and sat at the kitchen counter in the dark. The apartment was the same as it had always been. The sink dripped in the same place. The radiator clicked in the same rhythm it had clicked through every winter since they'd moved in. Nothing had changed. He had made sure of it. And yet, the quiet that sat around him now was not the quiet he had gotten used to. It was not the quiet of a life that was simply small and contained and manageable. It was the quiet of something missing. And the difference between those two kinds of silence he was finding was larger than he had calculated. He had kept Lily safe from the possibility of another loss by removing the possibility entirely. That was what he told himself. He sat there in the dark kitchen and tried to believe it was the same thing as being brave. He couldn't quite make the math work. Lily's fever came on a Wednesday night, the way fevers always do, quietly at first, then all at once. By 10 o'clock, she was burning through her blankets, and her breathing had that shallow, papery quality that made Ethan's whole body go cold, regardless of how many times he told himself it was just a fever. Kids got fevers. This was not the worst thing. He drove her to the emergency clinic on Cermak because it was closer than the hospital, and the waiting room was smaller, and somehow that felt important at midnight when you were alone. They sat under fluorescent lights for 2 hours. Lily dozed against his arm, her forehead damp, her small hand curled around his index finger, the way she used to sleep when she was an infant. Ethan watched the clock and the door and the other families in the waiting room, a grandmother with a boy who'd cut his hand, a young couple passing their toddler back and forth between them. And he felt, with a clarity that was almost physical, how much space was on his other side. He looked at his phone. Olivia's number was still there, unchanged. The last text between them a green bubble on his screen that he hadn't answered. If I did something wrong, I want to know. He didn't call, but he sat in that waiting room and for the first time asked himself the question without flinching away from it. Not who he was protecting by keeping the distance, not whether he was being reasonable. Just this: when Lily was sick in the middle of the night and the chair beside him was empty, was that the life he was choosing, or the life he was settling for because he'd convinced himself he didn't deserve the alternative? The doctor said it was a moderate ear infection. She wrote a prescription, explained the dosage, and sent them home before 2 in the morning. Lily slept the whole drive back. He carried her inside and tucked her in, and sat on the edge of her bed in the dark for longer than was necessary. Her breathing had already evened out. The color was coming back to her face. She was fine. She was going to be fine. She opened her eyes once, briefly, and looked at him with the unfocused softness of someone halfway between sleep and waking. "Dad," she said. "Right here." Her fingers found his wrist. She held on for a moment, not urgently, just the way you hold on to something you trust to stay. Then, in the clear and simple voice of a child stating an obvious truth, "Why can't you just be brave for me?" She was asleep again before he could answer. He sat there in the dark long after her grip had loosened. The radiator clicked. The street outside was quiet in the way streets only get between 2 and 4 in the morning. And Ethan Carter, who had carried everything alone for 4 years, on the reasonable grounds that it was safer that way, felt the last reasonable ground give out beneath him. He had told himself he was protecting her. From what exactly? From the possibility of someone leaving. From the mathematics of loss, which he knew better than most. From the particular cruelty of wanting something and then not having it. But Lily was 6 years old, and she had already learned to stop expecting the chair to be filled. He had taught her that, carefully, methodically, with the best of intentions. He had protected her so thoroughly from the risk of being hurt that he had simply delivered her a quieter version of the same thing. He went to the kitchen. He found a piece of paper in the drawer, the same drawer where he'd put Olivia's card, face down, weeks ago. He sat at the counter and wrote. Not for a long time, not the careful draft of a man who knew what he was doing. He wrote the way you write, when you've stopped deciding what to say and started just saying it. Several lines, crossed out and rewritten, a few things that came out wrong, and then, underneath them, right. He folded the paper twice and put it in his jacket pocket. In the morning, he arranged for his neighbor, Mrs. Callahan, who had watched Lily before when he had early job sites, to sit with her for 2 hours. He told Lily he'd be back by lunch. Lily, still puffy-eyed from the fever, but already asking for cereal, and Gerald accepted this with her usual equilibrium. He drove to West Monroe. He had not told Olivia he was coming. He stood on the sidewalk outside her building for a moment, aware that showing up at a woman's office unannounced with a crumpled piece of paper in his jacket pocket was not the behavior of a man who had himself together. He went inside anyway. The receptionist at Hayes Interior Design looked up with the polished efficiency of someone trained to manage unexpected arrivals. Ethan said, "I need to see Olivia Hayes. I don't have an appointment." He thought about adding something to make this sound more professional and decided there was no version of this that was going to sound professional. "Please," he added instead. Olivia came to the reception area 2 minutes later. She was in work clothes, a project folder in one hand, reading glasses pushed up on her head. She stopped when she saw him. Whatever expression she had prepared for a client or a delivery fell away. She led him to a small conference room off the main corridor. Glass walls, a long table, morning light coming in from the east. She set her folder down and stood across from him and waited with the patience of someone who had already decided not to make this easy for him, but also not harder than it needed to be. Ethan reached into his pocket. He set the folded paper on the table but didn't push it toward her. He wasn't there to hand her a note like a middle schooler. He'd needed to write it to know what he actually meant, but he was going to say it. "Lily was sick last night," he started. "Ear infection. She's fine." He registered Olivia's expression tighten for a fraction of a second, and then steady. "I was sitting in the waiting room at 2 in the morning, and your number was in my phone, and I didn't call because I'd spent the last 3 weeks convincing myself that the distance between my life and yours was the responsible conclusion." He stopped. "I was wrong about why you were spending time with us." Olivia said nothing. Her hands were flat on the table, and she was looking at him steadily. "A guy at work told me you felt sorry for us," Ethan continued. "And then I heard you turn down some invitation, a party, a client thing, I don't know what it was. And you said you had other plans on Saturday. And I put those two things together in the worst possible way, because it was easier to believe that than to believe the other thing." "What other thing?" Olivia's voice was even, but not cold. "That you actually wanted to be there." He met her eyes. "I don't have a way to explain my life to you that makes it make sense to want to be part of it. I know that. I know what my apartment looks like and what I earn and where I'm likely to be in 10 years. I know it's not the same world." He reached up and pressed the back of his hand against his jaw briefly. "But I started feeling something, and I didn't know how to feel that, and also be the person who keeps everything together. So I removed the problem." The words landed in the room. Through the glass walls, he could see the open studio floor of the office, 2 of Olivia's colleagues moving between desks, unaware. Olivia looked at the folded paper on the table for a moment. Then she looked at him. "The plans I canceled that Saturday," she said carefully, "were to go see Lily draw." She let that settle. She'd told me at dinner she was working on something for a school project, a drawing of a room she wished she had. I asked if I could see it when it was finished. She took that very literally and told me Saturday afternoon. A quiet beat. You didn't know that. He hadn't known that. "I don't need your life to be a different life," Olivia said. "I need you to stop deciding what I can handle before you've asked me." There was no heat in it, just the clear weight of someone saying a true thing. "And I need you to stop apologizing for existing in the same space as me because it is exhausting to watch." Ethan stood across the table from her and felt something in his chest come loose from where it had been braced for a long time. "I'm not going to be good at this immediately," he said. "I'm not asking for immediately." She pulled out the chair beside her and sat down, which seemed to signal something. Not forgiveness exactly, but a willingness to be in the same room with the whole honest truth of it. "Sit down, Ethan. I'll get us coffee." He sat down. She came back with 2 mugs from the office kitchen, plain mugs, nothing fancy. And they sat together in the glass-walled room and talked until his 2 hours were nearly up and he needed to get back to Lily. Not about everything, but enough. Enough to find the shape of where the misunderstanding had started and enough to see, on the other side of it, what might still be possible. He drove home through morning traffic with the crumpled note still in his pocket, unread by anyone but himself. He didn't need it anymore. He'd already said the part that mattered. What followed was not a transformation. It was slower than that, and more ordinary, and that was what made it real. Olivia started coming around on Saturday afternoons. Not every week. Some weeks Ethan had overtime, and some weeks Lily had a cold, and life continued to be the irregular, unromantic thing it had always been. But she came, and she stayed for dinner sometimes, and she learned where Ethan kept the pasta in the cabinet above the stove. She brought a small paint set for Lily once, and they spent an entire Sunday afternoon painting scenes on the back of brown paper grocery bags, which Lily declared far superior to proper canvas. Ethan learned, slowly, to accept help without cataloging what it cost him. It was harder than he'd expected. Some habits are structural. They hold up the whole building, and you can't remove them without figuring out what goes in their place. He figured it out, piece by piece, in the small daily increments of a man who had decided to try. Lily watched all of it with the attentive calm of a child who had learned not to wish too hard for things. And then, gradually, she seemed to unlearn that. She started asking for the window seat again. She stopped treating Saturday afternoons like something that might disappear. The proposal was not planned. It was a Thursday evening in early spring. Lily was at the table doing homework. Olivia was standing at the counter helping Ethan figure out why his attempt at chicken soup had gone sideways. The kitchen was warm and slightly chaotic and smelled of thyme and overcooked onions, and Lily was arguing that Gerald deserved his own chair at the table, and Olivia was saying that Gerald was welcome to a chair if he could demonstrate basic table manners. Ethan looked at the two of them, his daughter and this woman who had walked into his life on a Tuesday evening because a little girl dropped a dinosaur, and something in him went very still and very certain at the same time. He didn't have a ring. He hadn't planned anything. He had a wooden spoon in one hand and soup on the stove, and a 6-year-old watching with wide eyes as he set the spoon down and turned to Olivia and lowered himself to one knee on the kitchen tile. Olivia looked down at him. Something moved across her face. Surprise, and then something that wasn't surprise at all, as if she had been waiting for this specific moment, without knowing that was what she was doing. "I don't have a speech," Ethan said. "I just know that this, right here, is the only place I want to be." Olivia said, "Yes." She said it before he'd finished. He hadn't quite gotten to the question yet, technically speaking, but they both let that go. Lily had already left her chair. She hit them both at once, arms thrown wide, her laughter the loud and total kind that has no self-consciousness in it at all. The soup boiled over on the stove. Nobody moved to address it for a full minute. Outside the kitchen window, the last of the winter light was going amber over the south side rooftops. It looked, Ethan thought, like it meant something. It did. Sometimes the thing that changes your life doesn't arrive as something large or loud. It arrives as a 6-year-old girl who doesn't know enough to be afraid, and 2 adults who finally find the courage to listen.